So Biden showed up at 9/11 after the victims' families told him not to. This is in Shanksville. It was a pretty good speech. He says in his speech, he says there's plenty of answers or questions still to this day. We need to be, and he said, we need to declassify this. That's what he said. So we can get to the bottom of this. Thank you to the victims' families who continue to sue.
When becoming aware of what was taking place on the ground that morning.
So guess who's going to speak here?
To band together at a moment
in Shanksville.
Without regard for political, religious,
Rumsfeld's dead.
professional, or cultural differences.
So over 2,000 responders have died of cancer. Now remember, the EPA covered that up. The EPA lied, and the EPA covered up the toxin. John Stewart did so much great work on that. What about Iraq and Afghanistan? How many soldiers have lost their lives? Right around 3,000 in Afghanistan. Iraq, probably even more. If you add the suicide that's come home, you're talking probably tens of thousands. How about innocent Iraqis?
Our heroes united.
Well over a million. Afghans and Iraqis. Well over a million. Over a million Iraqis. That's a low estimate. Many women and children. In the recoil, he says in this great speech, he talked about he said it like this. He says the ripples from 9/11 are unfathomable. And he says we need it declassified and the questions answered.
9:28.
Declassify it!
3 a.m.
I mean, how many presidents later? It's 20 fucking years. Thank you to the victims' families who are relentless in suing. And suing. But think about this. We had to overturn the Solvent Wealth Act. Congress did it. Every senator before voted for that. By the way, there are people in Utah that voted to block it. Barack Obama vetoed it. So you can't overrun a veto in Congress. I mean, you got to have 2/3, Senate and House. They did it. Yet the president still throw down and freaking will not declassify. They will not. Trump said he would. Trump went crazy. Did so much activism. He didn't. Biden, he didn't. Obama? He ran as a peace activist. He says, who knew my greatest suit, one of my greatest attributes would be killing people. He killed more people than Bush as far as innocent. This speech, he said in Shanksville, the ripples, the repercussions of 9/11 are unfathomable. Oh, wow. We chasing ghosts? The 19 that literally did it, they were killed that day. How about the people that enablers? At best, if you give them the benefit of the doubt, were derelict in duty. At best, they were derelict in duty. The President of the United States, the CIA, the NSA, all the powers there be, at very least, if you give them the benefit of the doubt, were completely derelict in duty. The response revolts my soul. They were not Afghans. They were not Saudis. 20 years. Okay, so if you buy in the narrative that bin Laden orchestrated this, say you buy that narrative. Bin Laden was supposedly killed right after the Fukushima disaster in 2011. May 2nd. What year is it? What year is it? 10 years still. Everyone who's died post the death of him.
And remember the thousands of lives ripped from the embrace of their families the morning of September 11th, 2001.
What a horrible
including the 40
event.
heroes of Flight 93.
What a horrible event.
But rather the question to be considered is, are we worthy of their sacrifice?
Gordon Felt's brother Edward was killed in the crash of United Airlines Flight 93.
He said it. We need it declassified.
President Bush is to make remarks shortly, and here in New York, the solemn recitation of names.
Let's get Bush. It doesn't matter who watches this now. Contemporary society is a failure.
Even though you died more than 8 years before I was born, Your memory lives on through me and
It's
so many of
heartbreaking.
your family and friends.
So the plan was, did the United States fall into these terrorist plan, whoever it was? Remember, the war machine was down to nothing. Everything that's happened out of the pro-war machine, and by the way, to be a peace activist, to be an anti-war machine in contemporary America the last 20 years, is to be labeled as hate speech. To be a freaking anti-nuclear act. They sprayed white phosphorus over their own man. Over at Fallujah, the birth defects. Freaking where the Tigris meets the Euphrates. Revolts my soul is hate speech. To question why we went to Afghanistan is hate speech. To question who funded the 9/11 terrorists is hate speech. Well, who's the biggest shareholders in Google? Oh, they're a private company. Okay. To question this lie, the narrative is hate speech. To question how the towers came down is hate. To question how this plane came down is hate speech. To question anything, the political narrative, well, we know factually because of the lawsuits of the 9/11 victims, we know who funded it. We know who funded it.
Charles Edward Jones.
Yet, you call that out, Dan Rather,
D. Jones.
on CBS News, the greatest reporter of an entire generation. George Bush is a draft dodger.
W. Jones.
Is fired for calling George Bush a draft dodger when George W. Bush was a draft dodger.
Mary S. Jones. Andrew.
Went off to Afghanistan to kill the Taliban. Went off to Iraq to get a biblical side. Went on to Vietnam to kill the Viet Cong. Boogeyman, ISIS. Are we chasing ghosts? Were those 19 the only ones that were involved? Please. We know factually they were not only ones involved. We know people funded it. We know people enabled it. At best, the CIA, the NSA, the powers there be, the Rumsfelds, the Cheneys, the Bremers were derelict in duty. The Bush, Brother Bandar. We know that factually 20 years later. How much death? How many ripples in the sea? Mission accomplished. We fell right in. That's hate speech, Kevin Blanch. To question who did 9/11, to question anything about 3/11, to question the war machine, to question freaking the military-industrialized freaking complex is hate speech. I can't wait to hear W. Makes you want to cry. Everybody remembers that horrific day. The people that died. I watched him load my dad in a body bag. He was nuked by his own men in the Nevada test site.
And my father, Louis F. Everson of Georgia.
The people that did this, are they dead? Were they flying those planes? The people that literally did this, yes. They died that day. The people that enabled them, the people that funded them, the people that were derelict in duty, we memorialized those people. We didn't go after any of those people. We actually empowered those people. We made them heroes. We made them take the field in celebrity.
Recitation of names here at the 9/11 Memorial on this 20-year commemoration. Included in that group of names, you heard Michael Judge, the chaplain of the FDNY, among those killed, among the 343 from the FDNY killed on 9/11. I'm Aaron.
I knew 2 people killed that day personally.
From ABC News.
I knew Mrs. Walshman.
The ceremony of commemoration underway in Shunesville, Pennsylvania, the final resting place for those aboard United Airlines Flight 93, steered away from Washington. Includes a speech from former President George W. Bush. He was president in 2001. Just a few months into his presidency when the attacks unfolded.
Wow.
Stepping to the
Where's Brother Bandar? Rumsfeld's dead. Cheney's alive.
Accompanying him today is First Lady Laura Bush, who occupies a special place in the hearts and families of Flight 93. For on September 17th, Mrs. Bush traveled here to offer her condolences and to those of America to the families and passengers
Okay.
of Flight 93.
Okay.
President Bush is fondly remembered by everyone involved in the effort to commemorate the heroes of Flight 93 for signing the act that created this national memorial on September 24th, 2002. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the 43rd President of the United States, George W. Bush.
It's at 9/11 right now, the camera is, right?
Thank you very much. Laura and I are honored to be with you. Madam Vice President, Vice President
Madam.
Cheney,
Madam.
Governor Wolf, Secretary Holland, and
Madam.
distinguished guests.
Madam.
20 years ago,
Madam.
we all found in different ways, in different places, but all at the same moment, that our lives would be changed forever. The world was loud with carnage and sirens, and then quiet with missing voices that would never be heard again. These
Well, over
lives remain
1.3
precious to
million
our
people have
country,
been killed in the wake, in
and
the
infinitely
aftermath,
precious to many of you.
not including
Today, we
200
remember your
or
loss.
2,000 first responders.
And we
It was his
represent
EPA.
women
Remember her?
loved so
What's her,
long.
Whitman or whatever? She covered up the freaking censors.
For those too young to
She
recall
covered up the
that
censors.
September Day, it is hard
They
to
lied
describe
about the
mass
toxicity. I
feelings
mean,
we
ask Jon
experienced.
Stewart. How about all the children killed? How about the white phosphorus, the depleted uranium over nuclear reactors they sprayed over? Depleted uranium, that comes from nuclear reactors. But no, if you're an anti-nuclear activist, you're an anti-war activist, that is hate speech in contemporary American.
For the heroism and decency that opposed it. In the sacrifice of the first responders,
Nobody in Afghan, well,
in the mutual aid of strangers, in the solidarity of grief and grace.
we know who enabled them. We know who literally did it.
Of a people.
We know their
We
names.
were
They were
proud of
killed
our
that
wounded
day.
nation.
We actually know the people that funded them by
In these
name.
memories, the passengers and crew of Flight 93
They're
must always have an honored place. Here, the intended targets became the instruments of rescue, and many who are now alive owe a vast, unconscious debt to the defiance displayed in the skies above this field. It would be a mistake to idealize the experience of those terrible events. All that many people could initially see was the brute randomness of death. All that many could feel was unearned suffering. All that many
the reaction to
was God's
this
terrible silence.
revolts my soul.
There are many who still struggle with a lonely pain that cuts deep within. In those fateful hours, we learned other lessons as well. We saw that Americans were vulnerable,
Peace activists,
but not fragile.
real ones. Environmentalists fighting for Mother Earth. Anti-nuclear activists, that's hate speech. And standing up to the war machine,
Than we imagined,
that's hate speech.
emerging with
Who would
sudden
believe that?
splendor
Who would have
in the
believed
face
that?
of death. We vividly felt how every hour with our loved ones was a temporary and holy gift. And we found that even the longest days end. Many of us have tried to make spiritual sense of these events. There is no simple explanation for the mix of providence and human will that sets the direction of our lives.
Why didn't you give this speech fucking 20 years ago? You've got better speech writers now, huh? Rumsfeld's not writing his speeches. Cheney didn't write this speech.
Many have found they were actually walking step by step toward grace. As a nation, our adjustments have been profound. Many Americans struggle to understand why an enemy would hate us with such zeal. The security measures incorporated into our lives
NSA, Patriot Act.
and reminders of our vulnerability.
Again, the ripples are
And we've seen
unfathomable.
growing evidence that the dangers to our country can come not only
Mission
across
accomplished,
borders,
right?
but but from violence that gathers within.
The reaction to 9/11 is revolting.
Extremists abroad and violent extremists at home.
Yeah, we know who the violent extremists are.
Pluralism, in their disregard for human life.
Yeah, we know who's disregard for human life. United States military. They killed so many women and children abroad. For what? For what? For what?
After 9/11, millions of brave Americans stepped forward and volunteered.